Species. Unite.
Species. Unite.
And then instead of heroes, we started being referred to as terrorists. But that made no difference to us. I mean, we kind of carried on regardless. And we started trying to do as much damage as we could to inflict economic loss on these companies.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with animal rights legend, Ronnie Lee. Ronnie founded the Animal Liberation Front, the ALF, in 1974. The Animal Liberation Front is an international, leaderless, decentralized political and social resistance movement that engages in and promotes nonviolent direct action in protest against incidents of animal cruelty. Ronnie served 3 prison sentences in the 70s and 80s for actions that he took against places like animal testing facilities and breeding facilities for testing. He has been vegan for 51 years and is still out there every day fighting for animals. Ronnie, thank you so much for doing this today.
Well, I'm really pleased to be taking part. It's great.
For people who don't know you or know who you are, can you just start with where all this began, the 70s, and how all this happened?
I was really a pretty ordinary guy, kind of growing up, fairly ordinary child, ordinary teenager. But things all changed for me really when I got to the age of 18. And my sister, who's 18 months younger than me, she started going out with a guy who was a vegetarian. And I was very curious about that. I'd really hardly ever heard the word vegetarian before, let alone ever met anyone who was a vegetarian. So I was curious as to why that was. And he explained it was because he was against animals being killed for food because it was unnecessary. We don't need to kill any animals in order to survive. And he'd been a vegetarian from quite a young age. I think he was 17 at the time. He was very healthy. He represented the county athletics, so it certainly hadn't done him any harm. I was a huge meat eater. I was one of these guys that used to eat bacon rinds, and I'd suck the marrow out of bones and stuff like that. I was absolutely, really, really into meat. I tried to find any excuse really in my head not to go vegetarian, but I kind of couldn't. He was this guy that had been vegetarian for years. He was, he was in good health. His reasons for being a vegetarian were very sound. So I thought, well, I've got to become vegetarian myself. So that's what I did. After about 3 days of agonising. And my sister became vegetarian at the same time. 2.5 years later, at the age of 21, there was a health food store in the local town. And I noticed on the window they had a sign saying vegetarian food. Kind of went in there to have a look, and they really had products in there that weren't available in the supermarket, more kind of niche type products, quite interesting. There was a copy in there of the Vegetarian Society's magazine, and up until then I hadn't even been aware there was a Vegetarian Society, let alone that they published a magazine. I went home on the bus and I was reading it, and there was an article in there about veganism by someone from the Vegan Society. And she was explaining how cows and calves are slaughtered by the dairy industry in order for us to be able to drink milk. And also how, hens were killed at a very young age, hens that produced eggs. Most of them were in battery cages. The baby chicks, the male chicks, when they're hatching out they're producing the chickens to lay eggs. Obviously, males get hatched as well as females. The males get killed almost immediately. There's mass slaughter of male chicks. I was absolutely horrified. I didn't realise any of this because it's not obvious. I kind of thought that cows needed to be milked, almost enjoyed being milked, and that hens just ran around in the fields and lay eggs that were just picked up, gathered. I didn't realise that, and allowed to live out their life. I didn't realise the horror of those industries. So I decided, right, I've got to, being vegetarian is not enough. I've got to become vegan. I contacted the Vegan Society. They sent me information. And within a couple of weeks, I'd gone vegan, And I think had I found out about veganism at the time I went vegetarian, I'd become vegan then. It was just I wasn't aware of what happened with the egg and dairy industries.
So you go vegan, and then how long is it before you decide, wait, this isn't enough, I need to do more?
I felt right from the beginning, really, it wasn't enough, because I felt that, okay, I'm going vegan. I'm no longer buying into all this killing of animals and causing animals to suffer. But what about all the other people that are still doing it? If we're ever going to stop all this, I've got to do something about that. There's no point me just changing myself. I've got to try and change others, or I've got to intervene in some way to prevent others from harming other animals. How that kind of started was that there was a news item on the television about a group called the Hunt Saboteurs. Here in the UK, we have fox hunting, where basically you have mounted riders who pursue a fox using dogs. They call them hounds. The idea is for the hounds to catch the fox. Very often the fox just gets ripped to pieces by the dogs. So it's a horrendous thing. And it's not just foxes. It happens with hares. And at the time, they did it with otters as well. Went along the rivers and killed otters. And then the otters became a protected species. And so they switched to doing it to mink, you see. So, the whole thing, to me was horrific. And I saw these guys on the television, on the news item. I thought, I've got to join them, got to help them. Contacted the Hunt Saboteurs. They put me in touch with my nearest group. So I used to go and help them. But they were a bit of a distance away. They were probably about 20 miles away. So I ended up setting up my own group in the area where I lived. There's just a few of us used to go out on a Saturday and try and stop the hunt from killing the foxes. And we'd do that we'd have strong scented substances, like natural substances, but strong scented, that we'd kind of lay down so they couldn't find the scent of a fox, because they'll kind of hunt by scent until they actually see the fox, so they can, hunt for long distances just using scent. So we'd do that, and they use hunting horns to control the dogs, and we'd become adept. We'd get hold of some hunting horns and we'd become adept at blowing them, and so we'd be able to take control of the dogs and, kind of pull them away from chasing after the fox. And that was the sort of thing we did, and I did that for a number of years.
And then that wasn't enough, right?
What happened was there was a type of fox hunting, they call it cub hunting, because basically it's to do with killing fox cubs. The main part of the fox hunting season here starts probably around about November. But before that, from about August onwards, they do something they call cub hunting. And the idea is to train the young foxhounds to let them have a taste of blood. And basically what they do is they just send them into a wood, surround the wood with members and supporters of the hunt, send the hounds into the wood, and basically there are a lot of young fox cubs around at the time, and basically it's just a massacre. The dogs just kill the fox cubs because they can't escape, they can't run away, because they've got the wood surrounded with the hunt people. And there was what we could do about that, because with no chase, you see, the Hunt Saboteurs' tactics are very much aimed at disrupting the chase, when they're chasing the fox, but this was no chase, it was just a massacre. And so we were helpless, we'd stand by helpless, couldn't do anything. And we started thinking, well, how can we stop this? And so a few of us between us came up with an idea, well, why don't we go to the hunt headquarters, the hunt kennels, where they keep the dogs and the vehicles to transport them. We thought we'd go there and we'd cause damage to their vehicles so they couldn't go hunting the next day. We had a meeting in London. This would have been 1973, summer of 1973. We had a meeting in London. I remember we were huddled in the corner of a basement cafe in London. It was all very secretive, to discuss our plans to do this. And we couldn't do this hunt saboteurs because the Hunt Saboteurs Association, their policy was to operate within the law, but we were obviously going to break the law. So we had to call ourselves a different name, and we decided to call ourselves the Band of Mercy. And we set about doing what we planned, going to the hunt kennels, causing damage to the vehicles, kind of slashing the tyres and putting glue in the locks and tacks in the locks so they couldn't get in the vehicle or they couldn't start the vehicle, stuff like that. So they couldn't actually go hunting in the first place. And sometimes they managed to get the vehicles repaired in time, but other times they weren't able to. And the hunt had to be called off, which was great.
Which is awesome.
So that's how it started. We didn't really intend just to limit ourselves to hunting. We'd heard about a laboratory that was being built kind of in the Midlands area of England, and they were going to do radiation experiments on animals there. And there'd been local opposition to this laboratory, but the local opposition had failed to get it stopped, and the building of it had been approved. We went to look at it, and the construction had only just started. We thought, well, there's nothing much there to damage at the moment, so we'll wait a bit longer. But in the November of 1973, there was two of us. We were out sabotaging a hunt in that area, and we thought, we'll go and look at this laboratory, see what's happening. And the construction had kind of advanced, and it seemed there's quite a lot there that could be destroyed, you see. So we waited until the workforce had left, and we had a gallon of petrol, gasoline in the back of our car in case we ran out while we're on the hunt. And so we thought, right, why don't we go and, set fire to this place? There's no one in there. We drove off with all the flames raging, and we thought, great. This place was probably about 15 miles from where I lived. And so I was able to get the local newspaper during the week, and there was a small article about the fire that it had caused. I think it cost about £25,000 worth of damage, which I suppose is about $30,000 now. That would be 15 times the amount now. And we were kind of sort of pleased and disappointed at the same time, because obviously we had done a lot of damage, but the place wasn't destroyed. So we thought, right, we need to have another go. So we went back a few days later, and this time we took about 4 or 5 gallons of petrol, and we poured it around the whole building, set fire to the whole place. We kind of got confused during it all, and we planned an escape route, and then in the confusion we weren't able to use it, and so we ended up smashing the window and running down the fire escape, and kind of we were all like all our shoes were on fire and everything. It was quite it was quite scary, but we got away, and we thought, right, that'll be destroyed. It got to be destroyed. But once again, I did the same thing. I got the local newspaper, and really kind of surprisingly and disappointingly, that had done less damage than the first one, and this time it was like £20,000. So we were disappointed, and we went back to look again at the place, but by now they'd installed security guards because they'd obviously realised someone was deliberately trying to burn the place down. They thought the first fire might have been some kind of accident, but once it happened twice. And so I sent a note claiming responsibility. I very carefully wrote this note in block capitals using gloves and posted it, posted it, some distance from where I lived. We sent a letter to the local newspaper claiming responsibility, and that was made the front page of the local newspaper. That had a big picture of our letter that we'd sent. And so but we couldn't do any more because they'd now had security on the place.
When you sent the note and claimed responsibility, were you now Animal Liberation Front?
No, that was still the Band of Mercy. Okay. And then the next big thing that happened was there's a kind of inlet from the sea on the east coast of England called the Wash. And every year there'd been a slaughter of baby seals in that area. It was some fishermen, I suppose it was to supplement their earnings. They'd go out in the fishing boats and they'd launch inflatable dinghies from the fishing boats and go onto the sandbanks where the mother seals had recently given birth. And they'd kill the baby seals and take their skins, kill them for their skins for the fur, you see. And there was a lot of opposition to this. There'd been protests. The hunt saboteurs had tried to intervene, I think, in previous years, but with only limited success. So we thought, right, okay, let's go and destroy the boats they use. You see, there were 2 fishing boats they used for it. And so I think a few nights before the seal hunt was due to start, we were each carrying two gallons of petrol, and we had to walk across a golf course to get to this, across to the riverbank where these boats were moored. We made sure no humans or animals on the boats, they were empty, and we set fire to them, poured the petrol, set fire to them. And one was destroyed and the other one was very badly damaged. And as a consequence, the killing of the seals got called off. And in actual fact, it never happened again, because in order to kill the seals, because once again, seals are a protected animal in the UK. So if anyone wants to kill a seal, they have to get a license from the government. Well, the government always gave these fishermen licenses to kill the seals. But after that, they refused to give them license anymore, because I think they thought just that this is so controversial now that we're not going to grant license. So that was the end of it. It's never happened again.
But that's a huge success.
Yeah, so it's a really big success. It wasn't just that one year.
Yeah.
The next thing that happened was a sympathiser, sent us a list of places that breed animals for experiments. These places breed the animals. They send them to laboratories. There was a guy that worked in some scientific establishment. They weren't involved in animal experiments, but they got all the so-called scientific literature, and he got hold of a copy of this booklet listing these places, and he sent it to us. So like an insider in a sense. And we used it as a hit list. We went around causing damage to these places, mainly their vehicles. We damaged their vehicles. And what happened was the 2 of us, and we kind of, this was in 1974, and we kind of went on a camping holiday down in the kind of sort of west of England, where there were a lot of these places, the breeding places, and we were camping near to one of them, and getting up about midnight, early hours of the morning, and we previously looked at the place in the daylight, camped nearby, pulled all the tents up, early hours of the morning, and went to the place and caused damage, and then went to the next place and camped there, and we were doing that. It was like the way our idea of a holiday, like a working holiday, you could say.
Exactly.
And the first holiday was like really successful. We damaged a number of places, mainly vehicles. There was one place where the place that bred guinea pigs for experiments. A lot of guinea pigs are used in experiments. I mean, hence the word guinea pig is kind of used in that way, isn't it? Sadly. When we went there in the daytime, there was a vehicle. We thought, we'll damage that. That was used to take the animals to the labs. When we got there at night, it wasn't there. Maybe the person who drove it had taken it home. So we thought, what are we going to do? So we got into a building, and there were all these baby guinea pigs, and we just took 6 of them. Thought, we've got to do something. We took 6 of these guinea pigs. And it was night was quite cold. It was summer, the night was quite cold. So we put them up our jumpers, and we were driving away from the place. We contacted a sympathiser who lived probably about 10 miles away, and he agreed that we could go and stay there, and he said he'd look after the guinea pigs. So we were on his way to his house in the car. We got stopped by the police. We had the guinea pigs up our jumper.
Oh, God.
And they said, what are you doing out this time of night? There's been a spate of burglaries in the area. I think these were house burglaries. And so, what are you doing out? And I thought very quickly, I said, we're on a camping holiday, but we had problems with the car, so we're very late. And they kind of they looked in the boot trunk, the other car, and there was all the camping equipment, so they believed me.
Sure.
And luckily they didn't search us, because all these little guinea pigs were up our jumpers, and thankfully they didn't make any noise. And so we drove off to the guy's home, and he looked after the guinea pigs for the rest of their life, which was lovely. And so as a result of that action, that place closed down, because they were so worried that they were known. They thought, well, how does anyone know about where we are? Because we keep it quiet. It's only like meant to be the animal laboratories that know about us, but someone's found out where we are. Or this time they've come and rescued guinea pigs. Next time they might do something worse.
Right.
So I think they were so worried they closed the business down. So that's
a huge success.
kind of another
too.
success is just by taking these 6
Guinea pigs. Wow.
So we carried on, and we went on. I think in the August we decided, right, we'll go on another camping holiday. You see, but this time we weren't so successful because there was one place we went to, and we parked on a housing estate which was about a mile away, and we walked across the fields and got in through the back of the place. And my friend sort of crept up to the front, and he came back and said, "Oh, there's a security guard in a building at the front." So we thought, right, we'll stay at the back and see what damage we can do at the back. But this guy had somehow seen us or got wind that we were there, and he had this special button that he pressed, and it alerted the police. And it was near a military base as well. So the place was surrounded not just with ordinary police, but military police came as well. And we hid under a building. These buildings were sort of raised. Some of them were raised off. It was uneven ground, and some were raised off the ground a little bit. And we hid underneath one of these buildings. But eventually, they discovered us, and we were arrested. And ironically, they used a tracker dog to find our car, and there was lots of evidence in the car that connected us to other things because we didn't think they'd find the car. You see, and we ended up being charged with quite a lot of stuff.
Is this the first time you went to prison?
Yes, and we were put in prison briefly. We didn't get bail straight away, and we were put in prison for 10 days to start with, and then released on bail. And then we had our court hearing. It was March of 75. We had our court hearing, and we were each sentenced to 3 years in prison. We spent a year in prison because it was the first time we'd ever been convicted of anything. Because of that, they gave us early release, and we were released after a year.
Was this the first time any animal rights activist had ever been imprisoned?
I think it was, yes. That was the first time. And in actual fact, we got a lot of sympathy from the media. The most popular newspaper, well, the biggest selling newspaper in the UK, we were on their front page, and they were calling us like non-meat martyrs because we didn't eat meat, non-meat martyrs, and how we were heroes. That we tried to destroy this terrible place that was going to torture animals. Is that really sympathetic to us? This article is the main front page.
Amazing.
I thought that's brilliant. But I kind of thought maybe that was the end of it, because other people would look at it and think, oh, they've been sent to prison. I don't want to be involved in that because I might get sent. And we thought that maybe that was, that was where it all come to an end, that type of action. I was a little bit doubtful whether anyone else would do anything.
Well, they'd be terrified, you would think.
Well, I kind of thought people might think, well, I don't want to go to jail.
Yeah.
The reality, it's all right kind of looking at what people are doing and cheering them on, but when the reality is jail, people might not be so keen to do it themselves. But I found it was the opposite. I had loads of people, mostly young people, from the hunt saboteurs, coming up to me saying, I want to do that. How do I get involved in it? I thought, this is brilliant. There's like loads. And so it grew. There was lots more people involved now. But people weren't keen on the name. They said, well, it doesn't say anything about animals, Band of Mercy. It sounds like a religious organisation, you see. And so that's when the name got changed to Animal Liberation Front, because it was like, it's kind of said on the tin what it was about as animal liberation. And that's when that happened. And I think that was about June of 76, the name was changed.
And were you organised pretty quickly?
I didn't kind of get back into action straight away, but a lot of the new people started doing stuff. And I think the first ALF action was quite a spectacular rescue of some beagles down in southeast England, where they kind of used this laboratory or facility where the beagles were being held for experiments, backed onto a river, and they got a boat and went along the river in the boat and cut through the fence to the back of the place, and they used a boat to rescue the beagles, which was really, really good.
Really smart, yeah.
Good thinking, because I think at the front, the front was more secure, so it would have been difficult to do it by road. So that was the first action, and then it carried on. And because now there were more people involved, there were a lot more animals were actually rescued, because we rescued those 6 guinea pigs, but that was kind of by accident. There are only 6 small guinea pigs. But now with more people, we were able to do larger rescues, rescue larger animals and rescue animals in larger numbers. So there's a lot of, it wasn't just the damage now, it was the animal rescue as well.
But you ended up 2 more times in prison.
I did, yeah. I mean, it wasn't long before I got back involved again.
Okay.
In early 77, I was arrested for, as a few of us carried out a raid on this was a place that bred animals for experiments. They bred mice for experiments. It was in southeast London. And we got into the place, broke into the place, rescued over 100 mice and damaged their vehicle. And I took the mice back to where I was living because I'd only just moved home and I didn't think the police knew where I'd moved to. But unfortunately, they did know. And they came the next day and arrested me and unfortunately took the mice, which was, very upsetting, obviously. And I ended up being charged with burglary and I ended up with 12 months in prison for that. A 12-month sentence, and I was in prison for 8 months of that. So that was, that was my second sentence. And when I was released from that, whenever anything happened, whenever anyone did an ALF action, or almost every time, the media would contact me because they kind of knew who I was. I'd been in prison twice. They tried to get in touch with me to ask me what my views were, why have people done this, and that kind of thing. I kind of sort of became the press officer for the Animal Liberation Front. First of all, I didn't really adopt it as an official position, but eventually it became that way. I then had a telephone and the media knew my number so they could phone me. It was more organised.
Was the media still sympathetic at this point?
They started becoming unsympathetic, really. I think when it was a novel thing and they thought it might have been a one-off action, they probably thought, well, the public don't like these animal experiments, that we'll probably get more sales of our newspaper if we're sympathetic to these guys. But then as time went on and the damage caused became greater, of course, what you're kind of really attacking is big business. It's, you're causing damage to big business. And in a sense, the media is all part of the same thing, the media tycoons and everything, they're all mates together, aren't they? And so I think that their attitude changed. And then instead of heroes, we started being referred to as terrorists. But that made no difference to us. I mean, we kind of carried on regardless. And we started trying to do as much damage as we could to inflict economic loss on these companies. One of our main targets was animal experimentation and laboratories and places that bred animals for experiments. And it put a lot of pressure on the industry. And in fact, the yearly official figures for animal experiments in the UK, in 1976, they were over 6 million. 10 years later, they'd fallen to below 3 million. And there's nothing else really to explain it apart from the pressure that we were putting on with these constant attacks. It was making these people think, it's better for us to avoid animal experimentation if we can and find another way of doing it. Because there are other ways. It's just that because they don't care about the animals, they can't be bothered to do anything a different way. But we forced them to have to kind of consider that. And I think that's what happened. And then in 1986, I got arrested again. This was kind of the biggie because I got charged with conspiracy, conspiracy to cause damage, conspiracy to incite other people to cause damage. They couldn't prove that I'd actually physically done anything. But what they were saying was that I was encouraging other people and, organising other people to do it. So for that, I got 10 years, a 10-year sentence.
And how much did you serve?
6 years and 8 months.
It's a long time.
Yeah, because at the time, provided you were of what they call good behaviour in prison, you served 2/3 of the sentence. But it was still a long 6 years, 8 months. It's still a long time.
And when you got out the third time, did you want to go right back into it? The
police were watching me, and there were several instances of where I knew they were watching, and I thought, well, really, it's going to be very difficult for me to get back into that again. So I thought, well, what I've got to do is find another way of, campaigning for animals, campaigning for animal liberation, where I kind of aren't in danger of just being arrested by the police straight away. Around about this time that I met my wife, because she wrote to me in prison. She was a friend of someone who already knew me. And in the end, it kind of there was just something that kind of gelled. When I get out of prison, we met up and got on really well, and we ended up kind of being together and eventually got married. Louise and I adopted a greyhound that had been, like an ex-racing greyhound. And we started helping out a greyhound rescue or local greyhound rescue organisation. We were like checking out the homes to make sure they were suitable and transporting dogs for them. And we both started thinking, well, why are all these dogs needing homes, and and we looked into it, and basically, it was because the dog racing industry that they were, when their sort of so-called racing careers came to an end, they were just discarded. And then we found out that a really large number were killed before they even started racing because they weren't suitable to even race. And no one was doing anything about this. Interestingly enough, they were in the USA.
Right.
People say everything kind of with protecting animals seems to have started in the UK. But with the greyhounds, it wasn't. It was the USA. It started off in the USA where there was organisations there campaigning against the dog racing. So we thought, well, there's nothing in the UK, we'll start one over here. So we started an organisation called Greyhound Action to campaign against the dog racing industry. And we did that for 13 years. And we were very successful in, we played a big part in closing a lot of the tracks. We'd get people to go outside the tracks and give information to people going in about what happened to the dogs, because a lot of these people are just ordinary members of the public just going for a night out. They probably had their own dog at home.
And they have no idea.
And no idea. And of course, once they saw that, they'd either not go in or they wouldn't go again. And so that cut their attendances down. Their profits were affected. And we also played a part in preventing a lot of where they were proposing to build new greyhound tracks. We helped stop a lot of those from being built. And that went on for 13 years. And then we kind of handed it on to some other people, and they then took it to new levels. It's become kind of, they've done things that we weren't able to do. Like they've done big advertising, billboards and stuff like that.
Does it still exist now, greyhound racing?
It does, but it's very much less. Yeah. A lot of tracks have closed. I mean, in the USA, I think it's pretty much gone.
It's almost all
gone.
gone.
There's been huge success in the USA. Yeah. I mean, Florida used to be a really big centre of greyhound racing. I think it's gone in Florida, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because we were in touch with a group over there called Grey 2K USA, who did kind of like these what's called ballot measures. Mm-hmm. In the US. We don't have them here. It's kind of like a state referendum, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you get enough signatures, and when it comes to the voting for the president and Congress and all that, people can vote on that, and they've won them in a couple of states where people have voted to end greyhound racing. And so I know Massachusetts was one, but I think there have been others as well where these ballot measures have ended dog racing in states. Unfortunately, we can't do that here, but nevertheless, there's been a big success in closing the tracks. So that's ongoing. I mean, there still are tracks open and people are still campaigning.
It's one of those industries that's going to die.
Even before we started campaigning, the dog racing industry had problems. And after that, for quite a while, I wanted to get into vegan education, vegan outreach, because I felt, well, that's fundamental, really. I mean, there's 50,000 animals a second are slaughtered for food, throughout the world.
Yeah.
It's a horrendous number, absolutely horrendous. And so I very much wanted to do something about that. And so I got involved in vegan outreach.
And do you think the way you're campaigning now by teaching people about veganism and spreading it is more effective in ways than the old days?
I think at a fundamental level it is. I mean, the ALF probably spared hundreds of millions of animals from suffering and slaughter because it spread all over the world.
Right.
And ironically, it's more active in some other countries now than it is in the UK. Because we have so much surveillance in the UK now with the closed circuit television and cameras everywhere that it's very difficult for someone to do something and to get away with it. And so the type of direct action people do now is stuff where they're prepared to be arrested. Yeah. I mean, my wife Louise, she was arrested on Saturday.
Stop. No, really?
Well, there was a group of, we have a laboratory, probably it's about an hour's drive from us or so, where they do experiments on beagle dogs and small pigs and rabbits and other animals. And there was a protest. Saturday, it was a day of action against 3 laboratories where there were demonstrations, but just people holding signs and banners and stuff. But there was a group of my wife and 4 other women. They went there with paint and handcuffs, and they, painted slogans all over the front of the laboratory through paint. They used like eco-friendly paint, right, so it wouldn't harm the environment. They sourced like eco-friendly paint, and 3 of them handcuffed themselves to the entrance, and the police didn't come for ages, so they were able to do loads of stuff before the police came. And then when the police came, loads of police came. And they all got arrested, and they've been released, but it's on suspicion. They probably will end up being charged at a later date with damage. But so it's still going on.
Yes,
but you see, in the old days, we'd have gone at night and we'd have broken in there, and then we'd have tried to get away. Yeah. But you can't get away now. There's cameras all over the place. Right. It's like so. Really, the only way that you can really do something, direct action, is you're prepared to be caught. But you can't do, obviously, that involves doing fairly small scale stuff, because you're not going to be caught for something that you're going to get 10 years in prison for. They'll only get, if they get a sentence for that, it's not going to be that much. Right. But that's how, and of course you kind of, we have open rescues. I mean, that takes place in the States for DXC, doesn't it? That, there's open rescues, and we have the same thing over here, similar. And that's the way the direct action's gone. But kind of in a way, in terms of public education, it's kind of better, because that kind of thing gets more sympathetic media, and the media allow the activists to have more of a voice.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, especially with some of the stuff lately in the US, the pigs at Smithfield, it's definitely made a lot of people think that weren't looking at this.
I think that's right. I mean, we have a group over here called Animal Rebellion, and they exist in some other countries as well. And that's kind of what they do. Last September, they had a series of actions against dairy companies, where they blockaded the dairy companies so the lorries couldn't get in and out. And Louise, my wife, was involved in that. She chained herself to the wheel of a lorry blocking the entrance, which is quite difficult for her because she's a wheelchair user. So she, but you see, it's something she can do because it involves staying still. She doesn't have to run about. Just stay still and chain yourself, and cause them problems with just not where they can't move you.
She's amazing.
That got lots of publicity, and that's, people reading that, hopefully the move towards veganism through learning about the dairy industry. I mean, a lot of it's kind of, a lot of their focus was on the environmental harm caused by animal farming. And of course, it kind of, it's becoming, more and more clear that it probably is the leading cause of the climate crisis. If we're ever going to achieve animal liberation, we're not going to do it while the vast majority of people don't believe in it.
No.
You've got to at least have a substantial majority believe in it, otherwise nothing changes. How are you going to get the right politicians elected? How are you going to get the right sort of government that will pass the right sort of laws to protect animals? Unless you educate the voters.
Absolutely.
You see, and so that's why fundamental to creating widespread change is vegan education. And so, despite all the direct action, I mean, now, like I said, it has a really big education effect. But the direct action we did back in the day, although it caused direct damage to the companies and it animals were spared through that, there was a limit in how much it could achieve because it wasn't education in terms of the public. And so it's, you're not going to change the culture, and you're not going to change people's lifestyle and the effect they have as consumers, and you're not going to change how people vote, and so you're not going to change the politicians, and you're not going to change the governments. And so that's what we have to do if we really want change.
And it's true, the more people that go vegan, and a lot of people go vegan for a lot of reasons other than animals, but I think once they're vegan, then they allow themselves to see what we're doing.
For me, veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. I think if someone says, I'm vegan for health, I think, well, you're actually a plant eater for health. You become vegan when you believe in animal liberation.
Absolutely.
I think if someone does adopt a vegan diet, what happens is then they can't avoid finding out more about it, and they can't avoid finding out the ethical about ethical veganism or what veganism really is about the animals and why that's wrong for us to oppress other animals. And it's at that point that they actually become proper vegans because they adopt that philosophy. It's kind of really being opposed to human supremacism because, all this problem arises from the fact that humans consider themselves to be superior to other sentient animals. And there's no rational reason. That's totally irrational. We have a planet where we have probably millions of sentient animal species, animals that are aware, have feelings, and we're only one. I've campaigned for animal liberation for 51 years in different ways, and I think all of it's been positive in its own way. But in a sense, I feel what I'm doing now is the most positive because it's the most fundamental and it's dealing with the problem, because we have to tackle the disease, like really rather than the symptoms, you see, because like if you've got kind of, people going out hunting or you've got people experimenting on animals, what's the fundamental reason they're doing that? And the fundamental reason they're doing that is because of speciesism, because of human supremacism. So unless you tackle that fundamental reason those things happen or why those things are allowed to happen, you're all the time just going to be saving who you can, aren't you?
Sure.
And the majority are still going to. It's a bit like going back. I mean, I kind of learned a lot when we campaigned against the dog racing industry because there was lots of people rescuing the dogs, but they were only able to rescue a small percentage of the ones that were abandoned by the industry, and still the vast majority ended up being killed. What we kind of did with the greyhound racing is kind of like a microcosm of really what has to happen in terms of the whole thing and educating people to become vegan. You've got to tackle the problem at the root, and you've got to cure the disease rather than constantly trying to treat the symptoms.
Sure. Well, thank you, Ronnie, so much for this today. This is incredible.
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk. It's been a great pleasure.
To learn more about Ronnie, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and you could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, speciesunite.com, click donate. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Ayana Peoples, and Anna Kalner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.